Maya, a young black woman exuding confidence, cruises along in her sleek Lamborghini, the city lights gleaming off the car's polished surface. She's careful to keep her speed just below the limit, enjoying the freedom of the drive. Suddenly, she spots flashing police lights in her rearview mirror. Confused, she glances at her speedometer, sure she hasn't done anything wrong. Still, she pulls over, watching as a white female officer approaches with a tense, scrutinizing expression. The officer's gaze shifts between Maya and the Lamborghini, her suspicion visible. Maya feels a wave of apprehension but maintains her composure, preparing herself for what she hopes will be a routine check. Little does she know, this stop will be anything but routine. The officer approaches Maya's window slowly, her eyes narrowing as she takes in the luxurious interior and the gleaming emblem on the steering wheel. Maya rolls down her window, greeting the officer with a polite nod. License and registration. The officer snaps, her voice tinged with a harshness that catches Maya off guard. As Maya reaches for her documents, the officer shakes her head. You know you were speeding, don't you? Maya furrows her brow, taken aback. I'm sorry, officer, but I'm sure I was within the limit. I was driving 60. The officer's eyes harden. 60? In a Lamborghini? Right, she says, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I'll bet that's hard to do. Maya senses the underlying judgment and hostility, but she forces herself to remain calm. I really was driving carefully. Is there another reason you stopped me? She asks, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer's eyes shift to the car, then back to Maya with a look that suggests she's already made up her mind about her. Where'd you get this car? She asks suddenly, her voice filled with suspicion. Did you borrow it from someone? Maya stiffens, sensing that this conversation is taking a sharp, unfriendly turn. It's mine, she replies evenly, meeting the officer's gaze. Is there something wrong? The officer raises her eyebrows, clearly unconvinced. Yours? I've seen a lot of things, but this, she gestures at the Lamborghini, her face twisting slightly. This doesn't make sense. Someone like you driving something like this. The insinuation isn't lost on Maya. She clenches her jaw, her heart pounding as she realizes what's happening. But before she can speak, the officer takes a step back, crossing her arms. Step out of the car, ma'am, she orders, her voice hardening. I'm going to need to ask you some questions. And don't try any funny business. Maya hesitates, glancing at the officer with a mix of disbelief and frustration. She knows that this isn't right, that she's done nothing wrong. But she also understands the power the officer holds. Slowly, she unbuckles her seatbelt, taking a steadying breath as she steps out of her car, feeling the weight of the accusation pressing down on her. Maya stands by the side of the road, watching with a sinking feeling as the officer circles her Lamborghini, her eyes darting over every inch of the car as if it's a crime scene. Do you have anything in this vehicle that you shouldn't, ma'am? The officer asks, her voice sharp and accusatory. Maya frowns, still trying to keep her tone respectful. No, officer. There's nothing illegal here. The officer's expression doesn't soften. Instead, she motions Maya farther away from the car. I'm going to conduct a search. Step back and keep your hands where I can see them. Maya's heart races. A search? I haven't done anything wrong, officer. Is this really necessary? The officer's eyes narrow, her face hardened with disdain. Necessary? I'll decide what's necessary, she snaps. You're acting awfully defensive for someone who claims to be innocent. Just step back and let me do my job. Feeling helpless, Maya steps back, watching as the officer opens her car door and begins rifling through her belongings. She checks the glove compartment, digs into the back seat, and even peeks into the trunk, her movements rough and invasive. With each passing second, Maya's anger grows, but she bites her lip, forcing herself to stay silent. The officer, clearly enjoying her authority, pulls out Maya's personal items, a notebook, a small bag, a pair of sunglasses, and examines each one with an air of smug satisfaction, as though she's expecting to find something incriminating. Quite the collection of fancy things you've got here, she mutters, a mocking smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Maya clenches her fists, her patience wearing thin. I told you, officer. Everything here is mine and completely legal. The officer ignores her, turning her attention to the trunk, rummaging through the small compartments and storage areas. Maya watches, a bitter realization settling over her. She knows that this search isn't about law or justice, it's about power. This officer, a stranger who knows nothing about her, has already decided that she doesn't belong in this car, in this life. When the officer finally finishes, she slams the trunk shut with an air of disappointment, her face tightening in irritation. Fine, she mutters. Nothing here for now. Maya breathes a sigh of relief, but it's short-lived. The officer steps closer, her gaze icy and calculating. You might be clean today, but I'll be keeping an eye on you. There's something about this that doesn't sit right. Maya holds her head high, meeting the officer's gaze. You can keep watching, officer. I have nothing to hide. For the first time, the officer seems thrown off by Maya's confidence. But she recovers quickly, her face twisting with contempt. Without another word, she walks back to her patrol car, leaving Maya standing by her searched and disheveled car, the bitter sting of humiliation still fresh in the air. The officer crosses her arms, eyes narrowing as she gives Maya a look filled with contempt. So, she begins slowly, her voice dripping with suspicion. Whose car is this? Really? Maya blinks, her frustration growing. Excuse me? It's my car. I bought it. The officer's eyebrow lifts in disbelief, and she lets out a low chuckle. Right. A Lamborghini. And you expect me to believe that a young woman like you, her gaze lingers meaningfully on Maya, just happens to own a car like this? Maya clenches her fists, struggling to keep her tone steady. I don't have to explain my finances to you. I worked hard to afford this car. The officer shakes her head, her smile turning cold. Look, it doesn't add up. Girls like you don't just own Lamborghinis. Unless, of course, she leans in. You've got some creative ways of getting things. Maya feels a flash of anger. Girls like me? What's that supposed to mean? The officer ignores her question, taking out her notepad as if preparing to write down a confession. Unless you can show me proof of ownership, I'm going to have to assume you stole this car. People don't just hand out Lamborghinis to people who can't afford them. Maya's patience snaps. This is harassment, and you know it. You stopped me because you saw me in a nice car and decided I didn't belong in it. Isn't that the truth? The officer's face hardens, and she steps closer, looming over Maya. Watch your tone, miss. You're already in enough trouble as it is. Maybe I should take you down to the station until we figure out where you really got this car. Maya's heart pounds. She can't believe what's happening. How easily this officer is twisting the situation, making assumptions based on her appearance, treating her like a criminal. For a moment, she considers explaining further, but she knows it wouldn't matter. This officer has already decided who she is. I have nothing to prove to you, Maya says finally, her voice steady. If you want to verify my ownership, look up the registration. It's in my name. But the officer ignores her, already reaching for her handcuffs. Let's continue this discussion down at the station, she says with a smug smile. Maya's stomach churns as she's led to the patrol car, the bitter realization sinking in that her only crime was daring to own something beautiful. As she's locked in the back of the car, she thinks of one thing. This officer has no idea who she's dealing with. As the officer continues to eye her with disdain, Maya takes a deep breath, steadying herself. She can feel her pulse racing, but she knows that showing her anger will only make things worse. She looks the officer directly in the eyes and says, "The car is registered in my name. You can check the records yourself." The officer scoffs, rolling her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you've got some fake paperwork to go along with this little charade," she sneers, waving her hand dismissively. "People like you are always trying to pull something." Maya feels a pang of hurt mixed with anger, but she swallows it down. She's been in situations like this before, treated with suspicion simply because of her skin color, judged by people who see her only through the lens of their own biases. But this time, it's different. The stakes feel higher, and the officer's disdain is palpable. Instead of arguing, Maya takes a step back, her silence becoming her shield. She's learned that sometimes the best response to ignorance is calm dignity. a quiet strength that speaks louder than words. The officer narrows her eyes at Maya's silence, seemingly frustrated by her refusal to argue. Nothing to say now, huh? That's what I thought, she mutters. You'll have plenty of time to think this over once we're at the station. Maya's hands clench at her sides, but she stays composed. She knows who she is. She knows that she earned everything she has. And she knows that her silence, her refusal to engage in this demeaning exchange, is her own small act of defiance. As the officer ushers her toward the police car, Maya holds her head high, a silent promise echoing in her mind. This injustice will not go unanswered. The officer may have power in this moment, but Maya knows she has a strength and a story that will soon make itself known. As the officer radios for backup, Maya feels a sinking dread. She knows she hasn't resisted. She's been nothing but respectful and compliant. But the officer's mind seems set. Moments later, 2 more squad cars pull up, their flashing lights illuminating the quiet roadside. Maya watches as additional officers step out, their expressions unreadable but alert, taking in the scene before them. She can feel the weight of their stares, each one making her feel more isolated and vulnerable. The original officer, her tone cold and sharp, announces, "You're under arrest. I warned you not to resist, and now you'll have to answer for it." Before Maya can respond, her hands are pulled roughly behind her, and the metallic snap of the handcuffs rings out, binding her wrists. Her mind races, disbelief and fear swirling together as she's led toward one of the patrol cars. "Please, this is a mistake." Maya tries to reason. "I haven't done anything wrong." Her words go ignored as the officer pushes her into the back seat, closing the door firmly behind her. Through the window, she catches one last glimpse of her Lamborghini, abandoned by the roadside under the streetlights, a symbol of her hard work and achievements now left in the dust. As they drive toward the station, Maya feels the crushing weight of injustice pressing down on her. Her rights have been disregarded, her dignity stripped away, and she can't shake the feeling that she's already been judged, guilty without trial, simply for existing in a space that some believe she doesn't belong. As Maya is led into the dimly lit holding area, the walls feel cold and unwelcoming. The officer takes her personal belongings, her phone, wallet, and keys, placing them in a secure bag. Maya's heart sinks as she watches, realizing that the final remnants of her freedom are slipping away. She tries to assert her rights, asking, "Can I make a phone call? I just want to let my family know where I am." But her words are met with a dismissive shake of the head. The officer doesn't even look her way, merely motioning for her to step into a cell. The metal door clangs shut behind her, leaving Maya in a silence thick with disbelief. The minutes drag into hours, with no sign of any updates or explanations. She tries to reason with herself, hoping that soon someone will recognize the mistake and let her go. Yet, as the hours pass, her frustration grows, her anxiety building like a weight in her chest. By the time the cell falls into shadowed stillness, Maya realizes the reality of her situation. She's been unlawfully detained, with her basic rights denied, and there's no one coming to her aid. Anger begins to simmer beneath her fear, and she resolves that somehow, this injustice will not go unanswered. As the officer returns to the main area of the station, she carries herself with a smug sense of pride. "Caught myself a real piece of work today," she announces to her colleagues, her voice laced with a self-satisfied edge. Young woman, driving a Lamborghini like she owns the world. Probably thought she could get away with anything. Her fellow officers exchange glances, some listening with mild interest, others raising an eyebrow. But the officer continues, convinced that she's just done her job well. She describes Maya as arrogant and entitled, never stopping to question her own bias. In her mind, Maya's expensive car, her calm demeanor, and her unwillingness to grovel all confirm her guilt. One younger officer hesitantly speaks up, "Are you sure she's guilty, though? I mean, you didn't find anything, right?" The officer waves him off with a dismissive scoff. "I know her type. She's hiding something. Just give it time." Her voice is firm, almost defensive, masking the deep-seated biases driving her actions. As she relays her version of the arrest, the officer feels a twisted satisfaction, completely unaware that her prideful assumptions are about to lead to a reckoning. As the evening wears on, Mayor Johnson's worry deepens. He's grown accustomed to the occasional late-night work call from his daughter, who often checks in with him no matter where she is. Tonight, though, hours have passed, and every call he's made to her phone has gone unanswered. Concerned, he uses his connections to track her last known location, hoping it's just a technical issue. But when his sources inform him that she's been taken to the police station, his heart sinks. He demands to know the details, thinking at first it must be a misunderstanding. But as he learns more about the officer's assumptions and the baseless accusations that led to Maya's detention, his worry transforms into anger. "This isn't just about a car or a minor charge," he says, fury simmering under his controlled tone. "This is about targeting my daughter because of who she is and what she looks like." Determined to set things right, Mayor Johnson calls his legal team and contacts the chief of police. His hands grip his phone tightly as he lays out a clear message. Maya's treatment will not go unchecked, and every unjust decision made tonight will face full scrutiny. The first light of morning spills across the city as Mayor Johnson pulls up to the police station, his expression steely and determined. Behind him, a team of high-powered lawyers and a few key staff members follow closely, their eyes sharp and ready for confrontation. The air is thick with tension as they enter the building, each step signaling that this won't be a quiet matter. The officer at the front desk looks up, her eyes widening as she recognizes the mayor. Word spreads quickly among the officers, and soon everyone realizes that the young woman they've detained is none other than the mayor's daughter. The station buzzes with whispers and nervous glances as officers and staff hurriedly straighten their uniforms, attempting to appear composed. The female officer responsible for Maya's arrest catches sight of the mayor and feels her confidence falter. The pride she felt last night has vanished, replaced by a cold fear. She braces herself, but a bead of sweat runs down her neck as she senses the tide turning. Mayor Johnson's gaze falls on her, unwavering and intense, and for the first time, she begins to understand the weight of her actions. Without a word, the mayor's lead lawyer steps forward, asking to see Maya immediately. The officers hesitate, but under the mayor's piercing glare, they quickly comply, guiding him to the holding area. As Mayor Johnson stands in the dimly lit hallway of the police station, his gaze locks onto the female officer who had arrested Maya. The tension is palpable, with officers and staff silently watching, knowing a reckoning is at hand. With a calm yet unwavering tone, Mayor Johnson asks, "On what grounds did you detain my daughter without due process?" The officer, visibly shaken, struggles to maintain her composure. She starts to stammer out an explanation, mentioning suspicion of theft and possible speeding, but her words falter under the mayor's relentless stare. Did she have a history of theft? Was there any prior report? Any evidence that warranted such treatment? He questions, each question dismantling her defense. Realizing the thinness of her reasoning, the officer's confidence crumbles. Her voice drops as she mumbles about the suspicious nature of Maya's car ownership, inadvertently revealing the prejudiced undertone of her actions. Mayor Johnson doesn't let her look away, and she feels the weight of her own biases pressing down on her. "You saw a young black woman in a Lamborghini and assumed she didn't belong," he states, his voice sharp. The officer's face flushes, her attempts to defend herself falling apart. She now understands that her career, and perhaps much more, is at stake. As the weight of Mayor Johnson's questions bears down on her, the officer's composure shatters. Under the unyielding gaze of the mayor and her own colleagues, she hesitantly admits to her actions, confessing to the baseless accusations she leveled against Maya. Her tone is defensive at first, but as her justifications unravel, it becomes clear that her only evidence was Maya's appearance. Other officers exchange uncomfortable glances, distancing themselves from her, and several step back, feeling the gravity of the moment. The whispers among them grow louder, murmurs of disapproval and shock at her blatant misuse of authority. Mayor Johnson, anger barely contained, demands Maya's immediate release. "You've deprived my daughter of her rights without any cause. You'll answer for that," he states, his voice ringing through the station. The officer stands frozen as the reality of the situation dawns on her. Her career, her reputation, Everything she built is on the verge of collapse. As Maya is finally escorted out of the cell, her expression is a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Her father's presence brings a sense of justice and strength, but Maya knows this ordeal is far from over. After a grueling 24 hours, Maya steps out of the holding cell, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and anger. Her father, the mayor, meets her at the station's entrance, embracing her tightly. The ordeal has left a mark. Her once confident demeanor is shadowed by the weight of betrayal and the sting of humiliation. As she walks out, the officers and staff avert their eyes, some with shame, others in silent acknowledgement of the injustice that's just taken place. But Maya's mind is already focused on what comes next. Her trust in the justice system has been shattered, and she's no longer content to let this incident slide. "Dad, she's not getting away with this," she says, her voice steady with determination. Her father nods in agreement, seeing the resolve in her eyes. Together, they make a silent pact. The officer who abused her authority will be held accountable, and the world will know what Maya endured. Within hours of Maya's release, news outlets pick up the story, and headlines explode with details of her wrongful arrest. Pictures of Maya and her father, along with footage of the officer who detained her, circulate widely. The media dives into the story, highlighting the unjust treatment she faced and exposing the layers of racial profiling involved. Public outcry follows swiftly. Talk shows, news segments, and social media platforms are flooded with discussions condemning the officer's actions. People express shock and disbelief that such blatant discrimination could happen, even to the daughter of a high-ranking official. Community leaders and activists rally around Maya, calling for an immediate investigation into the officer's conduct. The story quickly grows beyond Maya's experience, igniting a national conversation about racial bias in policing. The officer finds herself at the center of a firestorm, and for the first time, she realizes the gravity of her actions. The police department announces that the officer has been placed on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation into her conduct. The suspension is a sharp blow, and the officer, once so confident in her authority, feels her world beginning to unravel. She's aware that the mayor's influence, combined with public outrage, could make it nearly impossible for her to salvage her career. As she packs up her belongings, the officer starts to grasp the weight of her actions. Colleagues who once admired her now avoid eye contact, and whispers about her handling of Maya's case circulate throughout the station. Her confidence crumbles, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The power she had taken for granted is slipping through her fingers, and for the first time, she's forced to confront the consequences of her bias. In the days following her release, Maya, still processing the traumatic experience, decides that staying silent is no longer an option. She reaches out to the media, and soon, her story is broadcasted across news outlets. Sitting in front of the cameras, Maya recounts every detail of her wrongful arrest, from the unjust accusations to the humiliating hours spent in a holding cell. Her voice is steady, but her frustration is palpable. She describes how it felt to be judged solely by her skin color and her car, a stark reminder that racial bias remains deeply embedded in the justice system. Maya doesn't stop there. She calls for accountability and transparency from the police department, demanding that steps be taken to prevent other innocent people from enduring similar experiences. She becomes a voice not just for herself, but for countless others who have faced discrimination at the hands of those sworn to protect them. Public support pours in, and Maya's story begins to spark conversations about the need for real reform. The community rallies around her, and her story becomes a catalyst for change, putting even more pressure on the department to take swift action. Determined to hold the police department accountable, Maya's family decides to take their fight to court. Her father, a seasoned politician, uses his influence and connections to secure the best legal team available, fully prepared to see justice served. The lawsuit, alleging wrongful arrest, unlawful detainment, and racial discrimination, gains momentum quickly. Legal experts and civil rights advocates express support, recognizing the case as an important stand against systemic racism in law enforcement. The police department finds itself in the eye of a public storm. Internal documents and records are examined under a magnifying glass, and a formal investigation into the officer's conduct begins. For the department, This is more than just a lawsuit. It's a battle for their reputation, and the leadership knows that their handling of Maya's case will have lasting consequences. As the case progresses, the media follows every development, keeping the public engaged and informed. Maya's demand for justice is no longer just her own. It has become a rallying cry for others who have experienced racial profiling. The department is forced to acknowledge the growing demand for accountability, and Maya, backed by her father and supporters, presses forward with unwavering resolve. This is no longer just a fight for personal justice. It's a fight for systemic change, and Maya is ready to see it through to the end. As news of Maya's story continues to spread, community leaders and activists join forces, organizing rallies and protests throughout the city. Signs with slogans like "Justice for Maya" and "End Racial Profiling" fill the streets as people from all walks of life come together in solidarity. Civil rights groups amplify Maya's story, using it to shed light on systemic issues that have affected marginalized communities for decades. Churches, schools, and local businesses also rally behind her, sharing her story and urging their followers to take a stand. Maya, who had once felt isolated and alone in her experience, is now embraced by a powerful network of support. The overwhelming show of unity strengthens her resolve, and she becomes even more committed to pushing for change. The police department, on the other hand, is reeling under the weight of the public's anger. Each protest, each rally, adds more pressure on their leadership to take decisive action against the officer involved. As the public's demand for accountability grows louder, the department realizes that they can no longer ignore the calls for justice. They must confront their own practices and policies, starting with how they handle the officer's case. Facing suspension and a tarnished reputation, the officer finally grasps the gravity of her actions. Her name and face have become synonymous with racial profiling, and her career, once promising, now hangs by a thread. In a desperate attempt to salvage her job, she reaches out to Maya's father, requesting a private meeting. She tries to express regret, explaining that she made a mistake, and pleads for his mercy, hoping he might advocate on her behalf. Maya's father listens, but remains unmoved. He sees through her remorse, recognizing it as a response to the consequences rather than genuine understanding of the harm she caused. With a calm but resolute tone, he tells her that actions have consequences, especially when they stem from racial prejudice. Her attempt at an apology only solidifies his commitment to seeing the case through. He leaves her with a reminder that her actions not only affected his daughter's life, but have also shaken the community's trust in those who wear the badge. As the officer is left to reflect on her decisions, she realizes that her plea has fallen on deaf ears. The community's demand for justice, and the mayor's unwavering stance, has made it clear that there will be no leniency this time. In response to the growing public outrage, the police department initiates a comprehensive internal investigation into the officer's conduct. Internal Affairs begins by reviewing body camera footage, examining previous arrest records, and interviewing former detainees who interacted with the officer. What they uncover is alarming, a pattern of biased behavior and unprofessional conduct that stretches back over several years. The evidence reveals multiple complaints filed against her by individuals who reported similar accusations of racial profiling and unfair treatment. As the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that Maya's case was far from isolated. The department is forced to confront the reality of a systemic issue within their ranks. With each new piece of evidence, the case against the officer grows stronger. The department faces mounting pressure to make an example of her and to show the public that they are committed to rooting out discriminatory practices. The findings of the investigation are undeniable, leaving no question as to the officer's bias and misuse of power. After a thorough review, the internal investigation reaches its inevitable conclusion. The officer's behavior has violated both departmental policy and the public's trust. The investigators recommend her immediate termination, deeming her actions to be a gross abuse of authority laced with racial prejudice. The police chief holds a press conference, formally announcing the officer's dismissal and citing misconduct, racial bias, and unethical practices. He assures the public that the department is taking steps to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. The officer is devastated by the outcome. Once a respected member of the force, she now finds herself jobless and shunned by her peers. The realization of what she's lost, her career, her reputation, and her credibility, hits her hard. For the first time, she understands the weight of her actions and the profound impact they have had on Maya, her family, and the community as a whole. The consequences of her choices are irreversible, and as she faces an uncertain future, she is left to confront the full extent of the harm she caused. The police department, facing intense public scrutiny and pressure from community leaders, undertakes significant reforms to prevent incidents like Maya's wrongful arrest from happening again. They roll out new policies specifically designed to combat racial profiling, including mandatory training on implicit bias and de-escalation tactics. Officers are now required to undergo regular evaluations on their conduct, and a new complaint system is established to allow civilians to report any unfair treatment anonymously and without fear of retaliation. The department forms a community advisory board that includes local activists, civil rights lawyers, and residents to review policies and ensure accountability. The policy changes mark a historic shift as the department commits to rebuilding trust within the community. New initiatives are introduced, such as community outreach programs that encourage dialogue between officers and citizens. Although these changes are a step in the right direction, the department knows that this is just the beginning of a long journey toward equity and transparency. Maya's case becomes a catalyst for widespread reform, and her story is cited as the inspiration behind these important changes. For Maya, the experience of being wrongfully arrested and detained is a deep wound that will take time to heal. The public support and solidarity shown by her community help her feel seen and valued, but the trauma of that day lingers. With the encouragement of her family and friends, Maya begins therapy, where she processes the pain, fear, and frustration she felt. She confronts the reality of racial injustice and acknowledges how close she came to losing her freedom due to someone else's prejudice. Empowered by her story's impact, Maya decides to channel her experience into activism. She starts speaking at events, schools, and community gatherings, sharing her story and advocating for systemic change. Maya finds strength in knowing that her voice can help others and raise awareness. She becomes a role model for young people facing similar struggles, encouraging them to stand up for their rights and use their voices. Slowly but surely, Maya reclaims her confidence and begins to heal, knowing that she is making a real difference. Her journey from victim to advocate becomes a powerful narrative of resilience and transformation, inspiring countless others to join the fight for justice. Maya's experience transforms her into a powerful voice for justice reform. She dedicates herself to addressing racial bias and wrongful treatment, becoming a beloved figure within her community. Local and national organizations invite her to speak at events, where she shares her story and encourages others to stand up against discrimination. She collaborates with activists, lawmakers, and educational institutions, working to implement workshops and talks aimed at empowering young people to recognize and challenge injustices in their own lives. Maya's resilience becomes a symbol of hope and strength, reminding others that they, too, have the power to fight back against unfair treatment. Through her advocacy, she reaches people from all backgrounds, creating a ripple effect that inspires them to demand accountability in all areas of life, from schools to workplaces to law enforcement. Maya's journey ignites a movement, and she becomes a respected figure in the community and beyond, a testament to the strength and courage it takes to transform pain into purpose. The former officer, now isolated and without her badge, faces the harsh reality of her actions. Jobless and shunned by her once loyal colleagues and community, she spends her days reflecting on the choices that led her here. For the first time, she realizes that her prejudice and abuse of power brought about her own downfall. She feels the weight of the harm she caused, not just to Maya but to countless others who may have been victims of her bias. With her life in shambles, the officer grapples with regret, understanding that her actions were rooted in assumptions and biases that she never questioned. She begins to see the ripple effect of her prejudice, the pain she caused, the harm to her career, and the message it sent to others. Though it's too late to undo the damage, the former officer is forced to confront her past actions and recognize the lasting impact they've had, not only on her but on the community she once claimed to serve. Maya's story sparks an undeniable call for change, leading to a series of meaningful reforms within the police department and the broader community. Local leaders, inspired by her resilience, partner with activists to implement initiatives that foster better understanding and trust between law enforcement and marginalized communities. New training programs focus on dismantling implicit biases, and regular workshops bring officers together with community members to share experiences and build empathy. Beyond the police department, schools and community centers introduce educational sessions aimed at youth, teaching them about their rights and the importance of standing up against injustice. The community as a whole feels a renewed sense of purpose, working collectively to create an environment that respects and values every individual, regardless of race. Maya's experience becomes a catalyst for long-overdue change, and her story continues to inspire discussions around equity, justice, and the power of community. As Maya reflects on her journey, she recognizes how much she has grown through her experience. The challenges she faced, the unjust arrest, the public scrutiny, and the fight for accountability have transformed her into a stronger, more resilient individual. Maya realizes the true power of her voice, understanding that by sharing her story, she has inspired change and helped others find their own strength. Maya's experience solidifies her commitment to justice, and she steps into a leadership role within her community. Her once traumatic experience has now become her motivation to build a future where no one has to face what she endured. Through her advocacy, Maya continues to use her voice as a force for good, paving the way for lasting, positive change. The reforms sparked by Maya's story become a permanent part of the city's identity. Schools, community organizations, and law enforcement reference her story as an example of resilience, justice, and the necessity for equality. Maya's experience becomes embedded in the local curriculum, used to teach future generations about the importance of fairness and the dangers of prejudice. Maya herself is celebrated as a local hero, her journey serving as a constant reminder that one person's courage can ignite profound change. Her story resonates with many, inspiring similar movements in neighboring cities, making her legacy one that reaches far beyond her community. Motivated by the desire to bring about even greater justice, Maya decides to channel her experience into a career in law. She dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney, focusing on defending those who face discrimination and ensuring that every person's rights are upheld. Her family, deeply proud of her transformation, stands behind her, encouraging her as she embarks on this new journey. Maya's aspirations signal not only her personal growth, but also her commitment to reshaping the very system that once let her down. Reflecting on her journey, Maya feels a profound sense of gratitude for the support she received and the widespread change her story inspired. She knows that her path was difficult, but she is grateful for the courage it revealed within her. Maya hopes that her story will serve as a beacon of hope for others, reminding them that no matter the obstacles, they, too, have the power to fight for justice. With a renewed sense of purpose, Maya sets her sights on a future filled with hope, determined to continue the work she started and to inspire others to stand up against injustice.
I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you.